All right, so we got to talk about the significance of what just happened with Russia, China, and following Trump visiting Xi Jinping in China, but really with the update from Putin visiting Xi Jinping, all of the stuff that's happening, what's being shown, is a mirror image in some sense, but there's a bigger significance at play. And I know that Putin and Xi meet quite often, but in this instance, with some of the fanfare, the optics, what's happening on the outside in terms of what's being projected and how it's being perceived, and also what's happening behind closed doors, there's so much going on with respect to this whole deep state takedown that I've been talking about for a very long time. So let's get into it, talk about some of the updates, because not many people are talking about exactly what happened with Putin and Xi among sort of this relation with everything going on. I want to quickly start with post 140 from Q, and this is one of the anchors to understanding what's happening right now behind the scenes that's outside of the optics of the public view, and that is this line: what if China, Russia, and others are coordinating with POTUS to eliminate the New World Order? Now, again, this is not to say that all these countries are the same and they're amazing and awesome and godly from a Christian perspective, but really they have a common enemy. This common enemy is threatening their own national livelihood, meaning that they don't want globalism. They don't want to be controlled by other nations. They don't want to be controlled by the higher powers that be. And so from that perspective, not ideology, not that they are the same in terms of agreeing on the same stuff, they commonly want to remove the same enemy that is threatening their very existence and wanting to maintain control over said countries. Now, I'm not going to show all of this, but the entrance from Putin is in some sense similar. And I know you can talk about the different people, prime minister versus the foreign affairs person and this and that, but effectively the red carpet, the rollout, and a nightly arrival, all of that in some sense is mirroring what happened when Trump arrived. You also got the children, the kids cheering, all the same types of fanfare. And if you watch some of the ceremony and all that that's happening, in some sense, it was the same in terms of here's Putin and Xi right here underneath that red sort of awning or balcony. They take a lap, they go around, they get greeted by the soldiers, and then you can see in the foreground here you have the children. They're going to be cheering on the way down. The same thing happened with President Trump. This is in some sense a mirror image. Yes, there are certain differences here and there. I'm not going to copy and paste that this is the same thing in that essence, but really it's a mirror image. You have all the delegates back here. He came, he shook hands with all of them. They took turns. You have the national anthems. You have the people playing the band and all that stuff, the same similar fanfare. And then they had a similar opening greeting. Now this is, you could, if you remember the other video and some of the coverage from Trump and Xi Jinping, this is the same, in some sense, I think the same room and the same type of behind closed doors discussion after opening statements. Now, I want to highlight certain things that was mentioned in the opening statements. Now, they both took turns for a couple minutes acknowledging one another and talking about and celebrating certain things, especially the partnership between China and Russia. But this is some of the summary. Now, I don't obviously understand Russian nor Mandarin, so I had AI sort of translate it, and this is what he said. And I'm not going to read the whole thing here, but just certain parts of it. So all the standard stuff with friendship, deep historical roots, and the partnership, and moving forward with that. Xi then shifted to the global situation, saying the world is chaotic and affected by hegemonism, that the people still desire peace, development, and cooperation. And he said China and Russia, as permanent members of the UN Security Council and major powers, should work together toward national renewal and help build a more just and reasonable global governance system. Now, this is Xi Jinping. Now, when Putin responded, he also mentioned, yes, the two ties and just moving forward together, the bilateral cooperation, the economic cooperation, all this stuff. And then he had this to say about foreign policy. He said Russia-China cooperation is one of the main stabilizing factors internationally, and that the world is moving toward a polycentric world order based on balance among different powers. He said Russia and China defend civilizational diversity, national sovereignty, and a more just world order. Now remember, this is all hinting at sovereignty, national sovereignty, not globalism. Although he did say that Russia and China would continue coordinating with the UN, BRICS, G20, and Shanghai Cooperation Organization. But the idea here is that among Trump, Xi Jinping, and Putin, they do not want global sort of territorial overstepping and all that. They want national sovereignty and to geographically allow themselves to rule and to reign and also have cooperation and trade and all that stuff, but really not stepping on each other's toes. They don't want a world police. They don't want somebody telling them what to do. Now, a bit later during the day or the next day, I believe, they participated in a very highly publicized signing ceremony. And so over 40 instances of individual sort of binders or contracts are being signed among the nations or the respective nations' leaders or I think corporate and even minister heads, and they're just going on and on with this. Now, of course, this is different from what was shown with Trump and Xi Jinping. They are more further along from an optics perspective with trade deals and all that stuff. But what's interesting is that people are comparing this and saying it was worse off, when really it's just different stages. Now, this is what Trump had to say about this when he was asked about it.
What do you make of President Xi meeting with Putin this week?
Well, he told me he was going to. I think it's good. I get along with both of them. But I think it's good. I don't know if the ceremony was quite as brilliant as mine. I watched. I think we topped them. Good team. But no, I get along with Putin. I get along with everybody but your husband and a few others.
Now remember, one of the biggest things here is optics and the signal that he's portraying, especially to the deep state and to the enemy and what they're seeing, what they're showing. And part of this was to emphasize the ceremony, the fanfare of it. And he mentioned comparing it, he's saying his was better, but of course, in some sense, they were comparatively, objectively, a bit equal in the red carpet and all of that stuff. But what he also emphasized that's important here is that he's getting along with everybody. Putin, he's getting along with Xi, he's getting along with people, meaning cooperation. Now remember, this is what Q says in post 15. This is a very famous post. There are more good people than bad. The wizards and warlocks, inside term, will not allow another satanic evil POS control our country, meaning the U.S. Realize Soros, Clinton's, Obama, Putin, etc. are all controlled by three families. The fourth was removed post-Trump's victory. And then the other stuff, this is, again, debatable. I'm not going to get into it. But the point here is that three families, and a fourth was removed post-Trump's victory. Now, you got to have a little bit of skepticism here because there's another post 72, where Q, when asked from an Anon, says, wait, go back to the post about the families that run everything and Trump taking one out. Was one of them this Saudi family? And again, this is a little bit later, and I'll show you in a different post, but the House of Saud was that one leg that was removed. But here, Q says, very smart, Anon. This information is real. Distractions are necessary. As say, meaning Saudi Arabia is the primary, U.S. is secondary, Asia, EU, Alice, and Wonderland. So stick with me as I try to connect some of this here with other posts. But here he says disinformation is real. Distractions are necessary. And so there's a clue here to say that some things that Q might be saying, again, it sounds contradictory, is actually false, and it's being done to distract the actual enemy because they're listening as well. And Q mentioned this in a different post where the enemy is also on these posts, on the boards, listening. And you have to kind of throw them off in order to allow certain things from military or operations perspective to transpire. Now, the one skepticism that a lot of people have is, was Putin also under the control of one of these families, or is this disinformation, meaning that he isn't, but the other ones are Soros, Clinton's, Obama's? And also, was a fourth removed, or was actually the third one removed? Because there are multiple posts where Q mentions that one side of the triangle, and here in this post 134, was removed, other sides falling. So meaning, first time in history, one side of the triangle, and of course triangle is three sections, is falling. So is it four sections or is it three sections? Or is it after Trump's victory, the third one was then removed? Here, plus, 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 and plus. And I'll tie this to a different post here, but here it's saying other sides falling, and all of this being done sequentially through this whole last 10 years. Now, the one that really happened was the House of Saud, U.S. control. And in post 133, the one right before this, here it says, hard to swallow, important to progress. Who are the puppet masters? House of Saud, which is plus, plus, plus. The Rothschild, which is plus, plus. Soros, plus. Focus on above three. Here, follow the bloodlines. What is the keystone? Does Satan exist? Does the thought of Satan exist? Who worships Satan? What is a cult? And then Epstein Island, what is a temple? And all this other stuff. But here what's interesting is it says Vladimir Putin, the New World Order, worships Satan. This is what he mentioned. And this is a different rabbit hole, but if you guys remember in 2017, I mentioned this in several videos, the failed assassination attempt on Mohammed bin Salman was the trigger point. And this was all done in Las Vegas. It was a cover-up. That whole shooting that was infamous back then was a cover-up for multiple other shootings that happened up and down the strip, helicopters shooting. And again, you guys can look this up, 911 calls, a lot of evidence of cover-ups. All of this, and Q also alludes to this, was a failed attempt. And then a month later, the whole thing of the purge, and this is public news, a lot of the purge of the Saudi royal family and many others was done. This was the cleanup, the House of Saud being taken down, and that was the one leg. And there's many instances where Q mentions plus, strings cut. Again, that post 140, 134, many others. And in post 1081, Anand says this: Putin is Russia's president. His job is to look after the Russian people. Put yourself in his shoes. He wants to win. Why not take advantage of his enemies? Trump comes along. Russia, Putin becomes our ally. Xi becomes our ally. Xi and Putin are also under attack by the deep state, which is rooted globally. And then here, Q mentions, and affirming in some sense, POTUS never telegraphs his moves. Think logically. Why did POTUS announce his intention to pull out of Syria? Moves and countermoves. These people are stupid and sick. Again, you got to remember, there's a global takedown happening, a war going on right now. There's signaling, there's moves, there's countermoves. And what we just witnessed in the last week is bigger than anybody can imagine. And yes, from a public perspective, where all the order of everything, the media and what people are saying from a national, global level, they got to have this kind of optics and neutral mentality and trade and agreements and all this stuff. But behind the scenes, a takedown, a removal is actually happening. So I'm not saying I know exactly what happened and what's going on with Putin, with Trump and Xi Jinping and all that stuff. But what we witnessed was a signal. If you talk about satanic order, the dark forces, they love signals. They love fanfare. They have to adhere to certain structures, certain rules and orders. And the same happened right now when there was signals, when there were symbols for all of this that's happening. So let's see what else happens. But I thought it was very interesting what transpired. Not a lot of people are talking about it. Of course, if it's not US-centric media in English, then it's not going to be covered. So more to come. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Also, if you guys want to support me, you guys know I am listener supported. In a season of transition, a lot of things are happening behind closed doors here for me. Would love your continued help and support, especially through prayer and financial means. All the information is down below in the givesendgo.com link. Also have PayPal, Zelle, Venmo. Love you guys. More to come. Talk to you guys very soon.